When we try to control something, that's where the emotional manipulation comes in.
I want to say too, we've brought up the word manipulation, but what I want to air is this idea that it is not always conscious or intentional or for the sake of harming someone else. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Queer Relationships, Queer Joy. I'm one of your hosts, Melissa DeSegurant.
I am Keelesia Helmut.
We're excited to have you. We'll start with our introductions. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a white, bisexual, polyamorous person, and I'm a marriage and family therapist and licensed professional counselor at Connective Therapy Collective.
And I am a licensed professional counselor. My pronouns are they, she. I am a white, queer, non binary femme, solo, still doing the thing, owner of Connect Therapy Collective. So, yeah, how are you feeling today, Melissa?
I am doing good. I have some queer joy. I haven't even shared with you because it feels like I want the authentic reaction. No pressure, but be excited for me.
I'm already like the anticipation, like, ooh,
Yeah, this is the day where I'm going to work on breathing and like making sure I'm talking at a reasonable pace.
we need
'Cause there's a lot of joy pumping through my veins right now.
I think that's a great thing to honor and think about, especially as sex therapists. Like, I think about how much fun it is to have that built up anticipation in lots of different areas, not just sex, but it's a great thing to connect to sexes and that joy, like having that chill moment to really feel it.
Absolutely.
So I'm excited. So before that, today, we don't have an interview again today. We have some time to chat about other stuff. However, let's check in on some of the questions we received. We really appreciate questions from folks, whether it's email or on our Instagram, through Facebook. But I found one question that popped up a couple times actually in the past couple weeks since our workshop. It kind of applies actually to our next workshop, but it applies to queer relationships in general, but specifically non monogamy. So the question I thought we could explore is someone asked if you're non-monogamous, person's non-monogamous, and they have a partner who wants to date one of their friends. Are we allowed, or the word allowed is very like, what does that even mean? But is it something that's acceptable or realistic to say, like, what does someone say to that? Can a person say no to their partner, or say, no, you can't date one of my friends?
Yeah. What I want to do is invite everyone to like pause, notice how you're responding to that scenario. For me, there's lots of things happening in response to that idea. Maybe we'll start broad and then dive into it further. But I think the thing we've been wanting to promote is yes, we want to foster security in relationships and connectedness,
Yeah.
but finding ways to do that that's not by controlling or manipulating our partner's behavior.
Yeah. So what is the difference? Let's explore this. What is the difference between making a request, part of an agreement? What does manipulation look like? What does controlling behavior in this dynamic look like?
One thing that we've talked about, and we mentioned this in our workshop, and it's one of those ideas that I've kind of pinned in my brain to keep updating my understanding around. But the difference between boundaries and agreements, that's where I hear the
Mhm.
controlling and manipulative stuff start to happen oftentimes. In that scenario, for example, I can imagine someone saying, "No, you can't go do that. You can't date my friend." That's a boundary for me,
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
which I'm not sure that that's the appropriate use of the word boundary.
Yes, yes.
I
Yeah.
like mate prep. That's really challenging for me. I think I'm wanting to create an agreement around that. I'm feeling this and this and this, and here's what's going on for me. That might be the conversation. And it's not to say that perhaps there is the agreement that, like, you know what, that is that is something we're going to agree to. We're not going to date one another's friends. And here's our reasoning why. And we'll check in on this agreement in the future and see if it needs to be updated. But
Yeah.
it doesn't totally feel like that's the right use of the word boundary. I think what they're saying is like, that's a limitation I have emotionally. I can't handle that. So therefore you need to not do it.
And that's not what a boundary is. A boundary is not about saying you can't do something. A boundary is saying, oh, I am not going to engage in this.
Like, here's my distance that I might need from this
Yeah.
situation if this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And even as I say that, that's the way I just phrased it is dangerous because that can really go into an ultimatum.
Mhm.
I'm like, yeah, well, okay, if you do that, then I'm out. I'm out of the relationship. And that feels kind of controlling. That's where I
That
jump into.
controlling and manipulative. I think so I'm gonna pause because there's my brain is going a million miles an hour.
It's a
Obviously,
day for
very hot
us.
topic. Yes, it's a day. It's always a day for pausing, but yes, stormy weather everywhere. Really hunker in and pause and breathe.
Yeah.
So when I think about that, the manipulation, the way it's phrased is when a partner doesn't want another person to engage with another person, they don't get to choose that. But you can say, and this is coming from, so I want to slow down because this is actually a concept when we talk about the word codependency, when we talk about not the word emotion manipulation, but we tend to use some words that are really normalized in AA culture, Alcoholics Anonymous. And there's family concepts from this model of craft. The synonym is craft. And so the idea is instead of saying, or sometimes rephrasing instead of saying codependency, it's using the term protective behaviors
Mhm.
and recognizing what we're doing in the situations. And so if I don't feel comfortable with a certain person, and for the simplicity of things, we know not everyone has like a primary partner, but I'm going to use the term primary partner to simplify this example. But this can happen in any relational dynamic. So partner A has a friend and partner B doesn't like that friend or doesn't want them hanging out. So partner B expresses their feelings with I statements and says, I don't like this person. So partner A says, okay, but this is my friend. And then partner B says, well, I am not going to hang out with this person. That's a boundary.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. But it is accepting that I have some responsibility to decide how close I want to be to the situation or not. And I can see that.
Yes. So I think this particular question about whether someone should date someone's friend or not is more complex. So I wanted to start with it more simple.
Yeah, yeah. I'm still having some feelings about that question.
I know. It's
And
a really hard question.
Life is full of hard questions, but what if you don't even know what questions to ask? Hey, it's Cardinal, bringer of ads and also editor of this podcast. To help facilitate some question asking, Keely and Melissa put together a free relationship check-in worksheet for anyone who wants to gauge where their relationship is at in order to shape where it is headed. Complete it alone or with your partner or partners. Link is in the show notes. Okay, back to the show.
So let's complicate a little further to include all types of relationships because in the queer community, I think this also comes up when a friend wants to date an ex of somebody's.
Mhm.
That can happen in anonymous situations. Queer community, especially depending on the town, can be small.
And it totally can happen in monogamy. I'm
Yeah.
having flashbacks to like college now. It's like again, I was a theater major. It was a really small program. Insert whatever assumptions you will make. Some of them will maybe be true. Many are not, but yeah, that whole it's like the possessiveness over people again. Like, even if we're not dating anymore, that's my ex, that's my territory.
Yeah.
I don't know if that I always talk about embodiment, right? And like just that energy that comes into my system as I say that, like, oh, that feels icky. There's something for me to work through there. Not to say that we need to be okay with everything and we can never have hard feelings, but we have to know what do I get to control in terms of these hard feelings I'm having.
Yes.
That's my distance to the situation. That's not what the other person is doing.
Yeah. Yes. So the point of trying to, so when we try to control something, that's where the emotional manipulation comes in.
Yeah.
And I think this is an example. There's not a right or wrong answer.
Totally. Totally.
We're exploring this and what that looks like.
I want to say too, we've brought up the word manipulation, and I'm glad because it has a really negative like connotation to it. And I think understandably so, we're kind of promoting that we don't manipulate in that way. But what I want to air is this idea that it is not always conscious or intentional or for the sake of harming someone else. And the reason I think that's really important to say is because as someone who has been manipulative for my own safety and
Mm.
unaware of that, like it's hard, we can't change it unless we can own it for ourselves. But if we're putting all this shame around manipulation, like that's a terrible thing, you did that intentionally, maybe it's making meaning, right? Because I did something manipulative, that means I'm an intentionally harmful person, I'm selfish, I'm all these things I could enter. No, it probably means I was feeling emotionally unsafe. And now I get the chance to go back and go like, ooh, what was going on for me there? How would I like to maybe do things differently in the future?
Mm-hmm.
So it's okay if you're hearing this and going like, ooh, I'm getting all triggered because of that word manipulation. Yeah, like that's something that we do. And we do want to try and be aware of that. And in my opinion, I like to avoid that. But it's also it's a normal thing, like we talked about with jealousy being a thing that people experience, these tendencies to want to get control makes sense.
Yeah. Yes. And we're talking about attachment, and we're talking about really looking at ourselves when we can notice those pulls that tug to want to control a situation. What we've got to really need to understand is, are we trying to control another human being? Are we trying to control another person's actions? And that's why, I mean, in any relationship, but especially when we're talking about non-monogamy, there's so many different people in play. It's not just two, which even with monogamous, there's never just two people in play. It's just really monogamy is just being having one person that's sexual and romantic, but we always have these other people coming.
Yeah.
So we have to look at ourselves and look at our actions and look at our intent and look at the narratives that we create. And what is interesting is, as we continue to expand the definition of relationship and having multiple relationships and different dynamics within these relationships with different people, what does that mean when we're creating these relationships and breaking the norms? Which means, because it's and also I think about, like, this brings up to me when people talk about like emotional cheating or the term cheating in general.
Mm-hmm.
And like monitoring the interactions, monitoring the connection that someone else has with somebody.
It's funny because as you're saying this, and you brought up this point earlier, like you don't have to like everyone in the system.
Yeah.
And if you go back to like Jessica Fern in Polly Secure's definition for non-monogamy, it's that everyone in the system is aware of and consenting to the relationships, not that everyone loves each other and experiences joy by connecting with everyone in the system. But it's that consenting to, it's that awareness of, and then hopefully we're being supportive to our partners of their growth, of their exploration outside of our relationship,
Yeah.
even if we don't happen to love the people they are exploring with.
And I think what it comes down to, if we go back to the original question of whether a partner should date the other partner's friend,
Mhm.
is looking at making sure having open communication with both people, both your partner and your friend,
Mhm. Mhm.
and navigating just having the communication.
Yeah. I think that's so key. And the thing to keep in mind is it will change the dynamic. That may be positive, that may be not feel so good. I don't know what will happen. It's different for every situation.
Yeah.
But I would approach that like when I'm talking to monogamous people who want to try non-monogamy, there's not a like, let's try this out. And then if it doesn't work, we're going to go back to where we are. This is now an evolution of the system and of the relationship. So even by posing those questions and having an open conversation, it's shifting the energy, in a different direction. So that's something to be aware of. It's not this like I think because I've heard people kind of avoid going into deeper conversation about like, well, what could happen? What might come up for you? What might come up
Yeah.
for me? How do we want to handle this? And they avoid it by just being like, well, we're so close. We got this, and then are just horrified when something goes wrong and there's no agreements and there's no intentionality. And then there's so much hurt because it's like, but we were so strong you know, um, have the supportive things that you need, like conversation, communication, decisions around how you want to handle the dual relationships that are now happening. You've got a friend now who's a metamor, which is that's a new situation.
Yeah. And, as you're saying this, also thinking about relationships, that part of being human as an individual and within relationships is growth,
Mhm.
and things are going to change.
Yeah.
So again, yes, if a couple decides to open up their relationship sexually and intimacy wise, romantic wise, but even the couples that don't,
Mhm.
there's going to be growth and change.
Yeah, they don't get to escape it.
And friendships
Yeah.
and children, of course. I mean, our relationships with our children, from elementary school to high school to college and beyond, they go to college. As adults, like the adult relationships with children, our adult relationship with our parents, our relatives, this is always changing. There's always growth.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things when we think about red flags in a relationship, or one of the things that really are blocks in relationships, are like assumptions.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I get really curious when the word stable comes up, when people are like, oh, well, I just want a stable relationship, or I just want a stable job.
Uh,
It's like, what does stable mean? Because I think sometimes stable is this idea that it's always going to be the same, or it's always there in the same way.
yeah. Yep.
And it's, there's no such thing. Like I tell, and this is a little dramatic, but it helps me. It may not help other people, but when people are like, "Well, like, I'm worried to change jobs because my job's so stable." I'm like, there's what does a stable job mean? "Oh, well, it's consistent." What does that mean? There's no guarantee that any job, anything is gonna exist for a certain amount of years, a certain amount of time.
I hope that the pandemic and the situation in the world right now is like really showing people that. I really hope we're getting that idea.
So if we are treating, and like Princess Hemphill says this, and we might have kind of quoted this in another episode, but this idea of community and relationships being a breeding entity.
Mhm.
And so there's constant growth and change, and like, like our skin, I'm not a biologist, but like the example, like our skin is constantly like changing, like new cells. I'm always not a biologist.
Shedding cells, we're growing new ones all the time.
Yes. And that's what relationships are too.
Yeah.
We're shedding things. We're creating new. It's almost springtime, perfect time to start shedding, the winter skin.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
And so that's the place to take this question to kind of wrap it up. And this will probably create more questions, honestly. is really dive into this, like you said, it's like notice how the question makes you feel. If you're a person with this dynamic of being asked about a friend being a metamor, how does it make you feel? Notice your body. What narrative is coming up for you in your head around that? I think one of the phrases is like the assumption of like, well, that's just not okay. Anyone would know that's not okay. If we start saying that's like this social norm, that's where we really get into like cis hetero monogamy
Yes.
activity.
And then we're by doing that, really shaming people who heard that question and went, "Yes! Oh my god, yes. Yes, 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 this is what I want." Because it's valid. Every relationship style is valid. Just do it ethically with consent and discussion.
And to be ethical and consent, there has to be all the information. So you have to be communicating with both people. All people involved have to be communicated with.
Yeah.
Which then, so that's the answer to the question, but it's not a simple answer because then you have, just like any relationship, because it's ever growing, never changing, is consistently checking in with ourselves and then having regular check-ins with our friend, having regular check-ins with the partner, or in that case, if the relationship does, if all three people decide, or maybe our friend decides to continue the relationship, even if the primary person that asked the question doesn't want the friend.
Right.
We can't control it. So then it's like, what do you do from that point if your partner chooses to bring on a metamor that we don't want?
Mhm. I mean, what comes to mind is like slow yourself down and take some time to process what's happening. And I don't know where my mind goes is okay, that person who didn't want that really needs to be real about whether or not they can continue to be in their relationship and be supportive of their relationship, their partner.
And
See,
that's the really, I mean, we're getting to, I think that's the really, really, really hard part.
yeah.
Which is if one of our partners or one of the people we're in relationship with makes a decision that we don't want or don't agree with, we don't get to decide whether they do that or not. But we do get to decide whether we stay, what kind of relationship, and if we stay in relationship with those people.
Yeah. And if possible, and I say if possible because it may well not be, I think we propose the most ideal situations, but if you make that decision, I can no longer be in this relationship. Go do your thing. I'm supporting of your decision.
Hmm.
I guess to me, the best case scenario would be that you give your partner a chance to know that that's happening for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, we don't want to have ultimatums like I'm going to go or, at the same time, I'm putting myself now in the I don't know what letter we're on, B, partner B who like wants to go date the friend. I would feel blindsided if all of a sudden someone was like, I've decided to leave the relationship. You go to like some communication about
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
they're feeling, the decision they're coming to. And I know I'm asking for a tall order because I'm asking for communication in a way that's not an ultimatum
Yeah.
and is not controlling, but is, we we got a lot of work to do as human
Yeah.
communication thing.
We do. And there's no right answer. And that's the thing and that's the beauty of these questions. And thank you for I'm not going to identify who asked the question, of course, but like, thank you for asking this really hard question because it's spurring more communication and discussion. But that's the piece. It's like we can't, at the end of the day, no matter what style of relationship we're in, we can't control other people. And when we go back to this idea of control manipulation, when we're slowing down, if we notice we're saying certain things or having certain actions, trying to get results or trying to control the situation, that's manipulation.
Yeah. Yep.
And it can kind of be a fine line, the difference between a boundary and manipulation. Because if you say, I can no longer be in this relationship with you because you are with my friend or you were dating my friend, that's legit. And how do you do that?
Mm.
Do you say that and move on, or do you create ultimatums and have these drawn out drama situations and, bring in other people? I think that's one of the things that I see, like we talked about before, the triangulation. And so
Mhm.
really just checking in with yourself and where you're coming from. And this is not by any means, I am definitely want to make sure I'm not saying this is easy at all.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
really hard. That's why the question's so good. So I think that's enough on that topic. Is there any, at least for me, because I could go on and on, but Melissa, is there anything else
No,
you wanted to add?
no, I'll just reiterate or echo the like, thank you for the question. And please ask us questions, like propose these ideas. It's so that's how we keep learning. That's how we keep
Yes.
growing. Like it's so fun to get to explore, like, ooh, what do we think about that? And be challenged, you know?
All right, Melissa, we get to hear your clear joy.
Oh my gosh. It was one of those like, well, where the hell did that come from? So I went on a date last night.
Went on a date.
I'm like laughing because I'm like, I wasn't even active on dating profiles. Like I just had a evening with a friend like earlier in the middle of the week last week. And just seriously was like, yeah, I'm really not dating. I'm like, wait, what just happened? So yeah, and for me, this was the most spontaneous, like connected with the person on Saturday, a couple texts throughout Saturday. It's like, yeah, you want to meet up? And for me, it was like, yes, because then I can just meet you in person. I can know if I'm feeling anything before I like get to know you too much and blow more than Saturday, which was spent in anticipation. So go me, like spontaneous. My solo date turned into a duo date, which turns out that's actually really fun too.
Yay. Well, that's awesome. I love that clear joy. My clear joy is a little nuanced. I feel like it really does play into our question, though, which is hanging out and exploring friendship that looks different than a friendship, but is not a romantic or sexual relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we'll even have, I mean, I feel like this is the beginning of another episode, which, and we may have that in our notes, but queer platonic relationship, or the idea. And I know some people hate that term, whatever, but the dynamic hanging out with an ex and really exploring this connection that isn't sexual, but we still really hang out and we're so close in a lot of ways, and exploring this in between, like exploring what all these different relationships and connections can look like and be like. And really, what I find this relationship is giving me the opportunity, this friendship is giving me the opportunity to check in with myself, look at old patterns, be like, does this feel good? Does this not feel good?
Mm-hmm.
Clear communication, because we, we do know each other really well. And so let's step into this and see what happens. So that's the clear joy. And along with my photo shoot, I mean, let's be real.
Yes, yes, yes.
I got to clear joy in the sense that it was like a queer photographer with my queer assistant, like, and just gender bending outfits, like trying on different energies.
I
So
love it.
that was a whole hell of a lot of fun. So,
I can't wait to see the results.
yay! Well, thanks again, Melissa. Thank you, everyone, for listening today. And I hope you all have a clear and joyful week.
Thanks for listening to Queer Relationships, Queer Joy, a podcast by the Connective Therapy Collective. Hosted by Keely C. Helmick and Melissa DeSeguron, with audio edited and produced by me, Cardinal Marking. Intro music is by Bad Snacks. Outro music by Victoria Instrumental. If this episode made you smile or think, tell us about it. If you hated it, tell us about that. Review us on iTunes or Spotify. Yes, you can review on Spotify now. Or send us an email at info@connectivetherapycollective.com. For information on our workshops and for more queer joy, visit our website at connectivetherapycollective.com. Love ya. Bye.